Hello everybody, welcome to another Versus Video Deck Tech. CVM here, joined once again
BBD
by Mr. Braun-Duin, fresh back from the beaches of Honolulu.
Yep.
From the Pro Tour, and we're going to be battling some decks.
Got that convention center tan.
The convention center tan, yeah. That Moto glow.
Yeah.
We're going to be battling with some decks from the Pro Tour. I am playing Temur Monsters, so I kind of gave this deck a shot when some of the spoilers were made. Very early on, we were missing a lot of the cards, and this deck is pretty far off from where I was initially. So
yeah,
I'm excited to give it a shot. So we have just our normal mana acceleration with Elvish Mystics, then we only have 3 Rattleclaw Mystic and no Sylvan Caryatid. So this deck is interested in ramping for sure, but we want to be able to attack.
Yeah, this is more of an aggressive deck, first, ramp deck second.
Yep, and then 4 Air of the Wilds, so we got an air-on-air action coming up here in our battle. Brian and I were talking before we started going through the deck, and I think that I would probably want a 4th Rattleclaw Mystic over the 4th Air of the Wilds.
Yep.
But, I mean, they both attack, and Death Touch is pretty sweet. So it also combos well with Temur Charm. So being able to fight with big creatures, sometimes you just have to 2-for-1 yourself if you need to kill something. But Temur Charm goes along well with some of the larger creatures in the deck. So we do have 4 Savage Knuckleblade, just your average 3/3 or 4/4 for 3 mana with 3 different abilities.
Pretty standard.
Pretty standard. We have 4 Polukranos and some Boon Satyr. So before in this deck, people are wanting to play Goblin Rabblemaster, as it is a card that can just take over games all by itself. But here we see Boon Satyr instead, and I feel like that's the slot where it's going to be. I don't think you can play both Boon Satyr and Rabblemaster along with your Knuckleblades. But I kind of like Boon Satyr. I like the flash element. I think it has the potential to be very good. Plus, it's a pretty hostile format for old Goblin Rabblemaster right now, so I'd rather have something a little more robust like Boon Satyr.
Yeah, and it's also possible that you could play Boon Satyr and Rabblemaster together. You'd probably have to cut Knuckleblade though.
Yeah, not sure I like that.
Nah.
Or it could just be where you play like some configuration with like 4 Rabblemaster, 4 Knuckleblade, 2 Boon Satyr, and then you can get away with 10 3-drops.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of putting a Boon Satyr on a Rabblemaster does make me excited. But
it's not as good as Blood Rush and Gorkline Rampager, that's for sure.
That's true.
But Boon Satyr's still pretty good. We do have some burn, 3 Lightning Strikes as a way to kill Goblin Rabblemaster, but more importantly, Mantis Rider, because that card it gives green decks just absolute fits.
Yeah.
We have 4 Crater's Claws because fireballs are good, and we have plenty of ways to turn on Ferocious for it. 2 Stormbreath Dragon, which is 2 less than what I would like to play, since I love having 4 dragons in my deck, but I can understand the concession that it costs a lot of mana, and you really want to be as aggressive as possible. And an Ash Cloud Phoenix, which I think is actually just very, very good in these types of decks.
Yeah.
So it's a way to turn on Ferocious. It's a very resilient threat. I don't mind blocking cards like Goblin Rabblemaster or Mantis Rider. In fact, Phoenix is very good against Rabblemaster. They have to have 2 removal spells to get it out of the way of the oncoming Goblin Onslaught. And I feel like this deck probably wants some more Phoenixes as we move forward, maybe over like the 4th Crater's Claws for a 2nd Phoenix. I don't know, but I've been really impressed with that card.
Yeah, I think Ash Cloud Phoenix is extremely good as well. So,
especially in a deck like this, like we saw quite a few decks at the Pro Tour where there were like the Braun-Duin mid-range decks for playing Phoenix. There was even a version of the Jeskai Winds deck that had Phoenix and Hushwing Griff, which is a real cute card in the top 8. And I think that it also fits very well in this Temur shell. As for the lands, we've got some basics and some fetches to go along with them. No delve spells to take advantage of the basics, so it's really just a mana fixer. I like having the Pain lands and the Mana Confluence. It does some damage to us, but outside of the Tom Rosses of the world, there really isn't a lot of mono-red decks that are doing very well, and being able to play this guy on turn 2 is a dream that I want to try and live.
Yeah, and I actually played against Pedro Carvalho, who's the person who's playing this deck at the Pro Tour, and he said that he probably has a really bad matchup against some super aggressive decks because of the amount of damage he deals to himself with his mana base. But the expectation was that those decks really just didn't exist.
Yeah, which they have a hard time beating Siege right now.
Yeah, which is pretty much the truth. So those decks pretty much don't exist. So, being able to be playing all these Pain lands and Confluences and fetches is not going to punish you as much as you would think.
And then we've got 1 Scryland just because you can. We do have the Frontier Bivouac.
Bivouac.
So we do have some lands that come into play tapped, but the payoff is very good since it gives us all 3 colors of mana. And with cards like Savage and Knuckleblade, definitely want to play them as soon as possible.
Yeah, and Temur Charm too. You don't want to sit on that thing.
That's true. Although sitting on it's fine. It's a mana leak, right? Just counter a spell later.
You
Like
know,
a bestowed Herald of
I
Torment.
do like the fact that you can sit on a Temur Charm and a Boon Satyr.
That is pretty good.
Yeah.
So it's just like a flash monster deck.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at the sideboard and see what other options we have. I don't think they'll be as flashy as the main deck.
Probably
They're
not.
still pretty good. All right, we are back with the sideboard for the Temur Monsters deck. And I actually lied. We are just as flashy here as we are on the main with the 2 Surrect Dragonclaws. As a concession to the fact that there just might be a control deck somewhere, and this guy just punishes those decks.
Yeah, and if your opponent like attacks you with a bear, you can flash in Surrect Dragonclaw to punch the bear. Yeah.
Unless the bear is Heir of the Wilds, and you don't really want to punch that bear.
Yeah, no, you do not.
We do have a Temur Ascendancy, which is also good against the control decks as a way to just like push through damage and draw cards with your large creatures. But I also think it's probably pretty good against any of the grindy matchups where you just want to be able to, draw as many cards as you can and just eventually win with a threat in play. We have a Hornet's Nest for those pesky mono-red decks, 2 Destructive Revelry as ways to kill cards like Jeskai Ascendancy. But it's also pretty good against decks that might have Whip in them, as from playing monsters in the past, Whip can be a big pain in the behind for these types of decks. So
definitely whip you up a bit. So.
That's correct. We do have 4 Stubborn Denial since we have a lot of large creatures in the deck. We're able to use Stubborn Denial as just a negate. Whether it's better than a negate, probably not. But it's also pretty good against the Jeskai Ascendancy combo deck.
It is quite good against that deck, yeah.
So they don't really have ways to get rid of our creatures, and it's just a hard counter for like everything in the deck. We have 3 Hunt the Hunter because everybody's playing Courser of Crewfix, and this is a very good card at punching through Courser. The 4th Lightning Strike and a Magma Spray in the sideboard just as ways to have cheaper removal spells against the decks that are trying to pressure us very quickly. Magma Spray is particularly good at killing creatures like Seeker of the Way when it comes down early, but it also kills Goblin Rabblemaster, which if you get behind, it's pretty tough to catch back up.
Yeah.
So that's the sideboard. I'm pretty excited to try out the deck. Again, it's been a little while since I played with Blue Chronos, so I'm kind of itching for it. But let's jump in the matches and see what happens.